Well, part 2 of what does Jesus say about? What does Jesus say about injustice? It's a big subject. It's a difficult one. It's a relevant one. I'm not guaranteeing hitting every single note about it today, but to bring some thoughts about it. My Bible is marked in a way that says he actually had quite a lot to say about it. We'll look at some of those as we go through. So, have you ever had that moment, that situation that you might have been in, where you suddenly realise that something around you just isn't fair? Maybe you're witnessing something and your sense of what is right and just kicks in. Maybe you are in a queue and somebody cuts in front of you. That's not fair. Maybe you see someone getting blamed for something they didn't do. Maybe you see people hungry and homeless and you think that's not right. That's kind of like we're sensing something in there about injustice. And we're just looking through this passage and picking up on some of the thoughts about what does Jesus say about injustice. And starting out from this passage is my starting point, where he is invited in for a meal with the Pharisees and the experts of the law. And instead of some polite dinner conversation, they always say don't bring politics into your dinner conversation. Instead of some really lovely polite conversation, he's kind of picked up on the fact that he hasn't washed, and then begins this really uncomfortable conversation with the people who have invited him as a guest. It's kind of like your worst nightmare, isn't it? When you put a meal on for people and invite friends in and then it all goes slightly wrong. How do you move the conversation on? But actually it gives us a real insight into seeing how Jesus thinks about injustice. So thank you, Tom, for reading through that passage. We know he's been invited to dinner. He hasn't washed his hands in this correct ceremonial way, which absolutely shocks his host. And Jesus responds by saying to them, "Now then, you Pharisees, you clean the outsides of the cup and dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness." Now, I've brought 2 mugs with me. I don't know if anybody would like a drink with me this morning. I've got 2 mugs. I've got my Minions, lovely clean Minions mug. It's not quite fresh out of the dishwasher, but it's definitely clean. I've got a Batman. I don't know if anybody would like to grab a drink and share a drink with me today. Would somebody like to pick? Tom, would you like to pick which mug? If you were to pick a mug to drink out of. Minions one. Oh, I think it's quite a good choice, actually. There you go. Nice clean water. Lovely. Nice clean water. I'm going to give Amy. Amy, would you like to have a look?
I don't think I do I?
Great. Oh. Would you like to drink that?
No, thanks.
No. This is a little bit of garden soil mixed in with all sorts of things. Yeah. But the example that he's giving there of these 2 vessels that look fine and together on the outside look great, but actually the contents aren't quite so nice. You won't get you wouldn't want to drink that. I was gonna suggest maybe the kids picked one, but then I thought probably when I was a kid, the things that I used to put in my mouth out in the garden, they'd probably just think, yeah, right, great. It's full of soil and mucky water. Shiny and spotless on the outside, looks great to drink from, but inside full of muddy water. And none of us would choose to drink from the dirty one. And what Jesus is saying here is, it's a bit like when, if we think back into the Old Testament and kind of looking at David, God doesn't look at the outward appearance, he's looking inside. Looks beyond that, the outward cleanliness, at our hearts and our motives and how he treats others. So the Pharisees looked holy on the outside, but Jesus is constantly picking into how their system is full of injustice. how they tax the poor heavily. They make religion a burden. And Jesus sees all of that. You know, even down to the level he talks about their tithing. They're counting out the leaves of the herbs that they're tithing. They're going to the absolute. We must be absolutely correct about this. But he picks them up on how they neglect justice and the love of God. They're called through their Old Testament, our Old Testament, through the scriptures, to learn to do it right. Isaiah 1 says this: learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed. These are the things they learn. Amos talks about let justice roll like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. And yet the Pharisees are choosing to not live like this. They are religious to the extreme, but lacking in fairness, compassion, and restoration. Jesus spends this meal pointing this out to them. I wonder whether they couldn't walk out, could they, because it was their house. I wonder whether they at any point thought, we might like this guy to leave. Jesus sets it out, though, right from the beginning, how he has come, what he has come kind of to do. When you think right back to his, I kind of called it his inaugural speech, if you like. You think about a new world leader and they get up to give their first speech. And when Jesus has come out of the wilderness, he's been tested for 40 days. And then he goes into the temple and speaks. And he says, using the words from Isaiah 61 that we've been rereading recently, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has appointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives, recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour. He kind of sets this out right at the beginning of his ministry. This is what I've come to do. He was here to bring justice and peace to those who were experiencing injustice. We've got T-shirts that I'd love one, but they're out of stock at work. That are black with white writing on it, and the word kingdom is written upside down on the T-shirts. And it's that sense of the upside down kingdom. That when we think about what the Jews expected the Messiah to come and do, which was to be a triumphant king, he actually came in completely the opposite. He comes in and brings this upside down kingdom, which is about a kind of mercy and justice and relief for the poor, which is completely the opposite to what the Pharisees are kind of living out, if you like. He says to them, now, what is inside you? You need to be generous to the poor. You need to be generous to the poor. They're not doing this. You give God 1/10 of your mint, your rue, and all other kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect justice and the love of God. You should have practiced the latter without leaving the former undone. If you think about a set of, the old style scales, not like your little kitchen ones you get now with just this round thing, but the old style scales where you've got your two sides and you have weights in one and what you're weighing in the other, and that kind of sense of religion for the Pharisees and justice in the other side, or love and justice in the other side. The Pharisees' scales are weighted on the scales of the religion. They lived out to the nth degree what the law said they should do, but they forgot the love and justice on the other side. Instead of being balanced in the religious nature, the religious life, balanced with love and justice, they had tipped it completely off balance. They'd forgotten one in favour of the other. And he's not saying stop worshipping. He's saying worship God with a just heart. I love Micah 6. I used to work for an organisation called the Lawyers Christian Fellowship, and their verse, if you like, not just theirs, because a lot of organisations use it, Micah 6:8, where it says, "What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God." That's the call to us to walk by, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. It's a recipe for faithful living. And this passage, which gives us this glimpse into how the Pharisees acted out their faith, comes as a warning to us. And it's a warning to the Pharisees, but it gives us a heart check to not be like the Pharisees, to be so faithful in our routines, but completely forgetful of what mercy and love and justice looks like. We need to have the truth, but we mustn't forget the kindness. The scales must balance. We need to serve the church, but we mustn't overlook God's children in need. We must have the balance right. It's the challenge against hypocrisy, isn't it? To live out what you say you believe. And the Pharisees were very good at the letter of the law, but not so good at the compassion that Jesus asks of us. They loved the most important seats in the synagogues and the respectful greetings in the marketplaces. And he calls them unmarked graves, which people walk over without knowing it. And he's accused of insulting them. He's speaking out truth to them. And he ends it with saying, those of you who are experts in the law, woe to you, because you load people down with burdens they can hardly carry, but you won't lift a finger to help them. So the expectation's on people, but without the help to enable them to actually meet those expectations. So he calls them out on the way they treat other people. And in the same way, there's a call out to us as Christians to the way we walk with God, but also the way we treat people. The one, our walk with God, because we've chosen to say yes to Jesus, to all that he has for us. We recognise what he has suffered and done for us, that sacrifice that he's given. But that doesn't just stop there. It has to act out in something. Faith and works, not one or the other. We mustn't avoid injustice, but we must do justice. And like my tags, I mean, a lot of those are the Gospels, but the tags that show just some of the situations or the parables that we see in Matthew, Mark, Luke, John in the Gospels, where Jesus specifically refers, he's either in a situation or uses a story to illustrate a situation that calls out injustice. It's the way he lived his life. We cannot deny that Jesus, at every opportunity, called out on injustice. It wasn't about punishing people, it was about setting things right. It was about lifting up the lowly and restoring what was broken. So, examples, I mean, there's so many of them. Obviously, we see here with the Pharisees, he's calling out religious hypocrisy. Some examples that we know, cleansing the temple, when he goes in and overturns the temple. In John 2:13-17, I won't read all of these out. It's more just to kind of give that picture of right through his life, he is calling out against the way people are treated. He cleanses the table, cleanses the temple. He found those who were selling, I've got to lift my glasses up to read, in the temple he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons and the money changers sitting there. And making a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple, and he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned the tables. Take these things away. They do not make my Father's house a house of trade. This wasn't because they were selling, it's because they were ripping off the poorer people who were coming with the sacrifices that they were selling for them. They were kind of acting unjustly towards people. It was religious exploitation. These people had arrived and had nowhere else to buy the offerings for sacrifice, and they were being exploited in doing it in the temple. And so Jesus drives them out and turns over the tables. It's an anger, a righteous anger, that kind of is displayed in this way because people are being exploited. You've got healings that happen on the Sabbath, compassion over legalism. You've got the woman at the well. Ellie mentioned the woman at the well earlier, and she's one of the names on my list. Where he speaks with a Samaritan woman. He crosses ethnic and gender lines in this one connection with someone. He speaks with somebody who you would not expect a man at that time of day to be having a conversation with, who is living in a way that he doesn't call out harshly, but he speaks to her with compassion. The parable that he talks about with the Good Samaritan, where you have a man who is beaten and left at the side, and then people who pass by him and leave him. But the story that he is giving is of the one who stops and helps. It crosses divides. It's acting against the injustice, not just of helping somebody who's been left. I'm just trying to find it. Here it is. It's like the social and the racial justice. Those two men would not have normally stopped to speak to each other, but the Samaritan stops and helps. It's the example of, who is my neighbour? Well, your neighbour is, and here's this story, the one you don't expect them to be. Compassion and justice is shown. You have got, I'm just going to pick out a few. The Beatitudes is the perfect example of the Sermon on the Mount. And it's about blessed are the poor, the meek, the upside down kingdom. It's that flicking it on its head. He hasn't come as this triumphant king, but he's come as the one who overturns. He lets the children come. He's not exclusive about age. He heals through touching a garment. He heals the woman who is bleeding and has been for years and years and years. Somebody who would have been excluded because of ritual impurity is included as he heals her publicly. The lepers, you've got ostracism. He heals the lepers, including a Samaritan. The people who are excluded from society because they don't fit, they don't look right, they're the wrong sex, the wrong gender, the wrong age, he welcomes them in. He shows them compassion. He brings social and racial justice, he speaks out against economic inequality, it's two difficult words together, and shows active compassion to everyone around him. The people he calls out are the people who are like the Pharisees, the people who stick so closely to the law that they forget compassion and love. It's all through his ministry. The Spirit of the Lord is on me to proclaim good news to the poor and freedom to the oppressed. That is the heartbeat of his mission. And he himself experiences that injustice when he is sentenced, put on the cross for crimes that he hasn't committed because of the call of the people to crucify him. And even on the cross, you see him ask his Father to forgive. He's calling out and showing compassion at every point. And out of that sacrifice shows mercy to us who don't deserve it, so that it continues on. That we can have a relationship with him and equally step up to the task, if we want to live how he calls us to live, proclaiming good news to the poor, freedom to the oppressed. The heartbeat of his mission should be also the heartbeat of our mission. And there are lots of ways that we can do this. Maybe and some of these we already do. And there'll be people listening who think, actually, I do this. We think, what can I do? What can I do to help? Maybe being involved in running the food bank or the local food pantry is a way to help out, bring kind of righting the injustices that are there for people, those who can't afford the things they need to live. Maybe it's helping with a small cafe somewhere that enables people who are lonely, who don't feel they fit, to come along and spend time with people. But it can become a place where people can find friends and help and hope. Maybe it's seeing the person on the street who has nothing, asking for a few pennies, and doing one small act can make a big difference in their life. It doesn't change their situation in that instant, but it shows compassion. I had, there's a Lidl down the road, opposite Mandala, a Lidl down the road from where I work, where we quite frequently go to grab things for lunches. And a guy sat outside there a few weeks ago, asked if I'd got any money. No, I don't tend to have much change on me. But I asked him, is there something I can get you to eat or drink while I get my shopping? And he said, would you get me some washing powder? I thought, I can do that. I could buy washing powder. Until he stood in front of all the washing powder thinking, do I get a scented one? Do I get bio? Do I get non-bio? But anyway, I took it back out to him, handed it over to him, and he said, thank you so much. And he gave me a hug. And he said, so many people don't remember. I asked them, and so many people don't remember. And I'm like, mate, here's your washing powder. Just a small thing actually made a big difference to him. I saw, in that moment where he said, can I give you a hug, I saw a moment of hope on his face and in his eyes, that somebody hadn't forgotten him. There are small things that we can do that bring hope into somebody's life. I know at the moment it feels like, when I saw injustice, I was like, in the moment, politically, this feels like such a big topic to tackle. When we see the protests around us, where we see flags going up around us and the tensions that it causes, but there's still an opportunity for us as Christians who love Jesus, who want to show that upside down kingdom, to still step out and speak out. There's an opportunity. Romans 12 says, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. We're called to live at peace with everyone as far as it depends on us, but we can still step out to speak out about injustice. Maybe we need to stand up for somebody who's being bullied, maybe at school, maybe at college, maybe at work. We can see those situations where somebody is not being treated well. Can we stand up in that situation? Can we make our voice count? I mentioned volunteering with a local food bank. Maybe it's when people are speaking harshly, we bring a gentle voice in. Maybe we need to write to our MP about something. Ashgate Hospice is having massive struggles at the minute. There's an injustice there going on financially. Can we step into the gap somewhere like Ashgate Hospice and write to people to express things? Because actually the more people that do that, we make a difference. I meant to bring I was going to find a candle and then I got distracted. It happens a lot at the moment. But think of a candle. There's my candle. Think of a candle. Even a small candle in a dark room, it's not fighting against the darkness, but it just shines there and it brings light into that situation. So wherever we find ourselves, we bring light into that situation. And that even just a small light, even just your little tea light, I'm picturing a tea light on my hand, even just the small light makes a difference. But when many gather together, it cuts through the darkness. When many speak out, it can actually bring change. Where is there that we can make our light shine at the moment? So, Jesus sees injustice and he calls it what it is. He challenges hypocrisy because justice without love is empty and love without justice is shallow. And he invites us to act justly, to love mercy and to walk humbly. It's not a political slogan. It's not something that we get kind of like the Pharisees and they're standing out there and they're wanting to be seen. It's the heartbeat of God. So just for a moment, I'm going to leave it. There's so much you can say on this. I'm going to leave it there. But just a moment of quiet. Maybe think of one place where you long to see justice. It might be big, it might be small. Just spend a moment just thinking about that. And maybe there's one way, however simple, that just as you think, that you can live God's justice out this week. We know that there will come a day when his justice, his mercy and his love will make all things new. But we still need to live in the now. Lord, would you help us to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with you this week. Amen.